you can hear me. No? Now you can hear me, right? So, welcome to the plenary session this morning. My name is Mark Esposito. I'm a professor of economic strategy. I'm blessed to be working at Grenoble, Harvard University, and Cambridge. And my major focus is in economic development and how we're actually driving and transforming old-fashioned 21st century into what it'll become the 21st century that we deserve. Today's session, we're trying to tackle one of the leading dilemma that we currently have in the world, which is, can we continue to innovate? Can we continue to grow? Can we continue to engage communities in a way in which we're also creating edges or advantages, in the way in which we have learned to do so in the last 30 years? At Harvard, I've been very blessed at working with Professor Michael Porter, who has introduced the concept of competitive advantage in the broader audience over 30 years ago. But his concept of competitive advantage is no longer the same concept that we can actually apply today. The world has dramatically changed. We're no longer a small elite of rich countries that are representing the minority. We have become an absolute different geography. And this is in the ability for us to recognize that geography that is important, that this conversation this morning will try to take us where the attention is to be taken, which is what our company currently doing. Are we able to transform the environment in which we operate? Can we engage communities in a way in which community can create a value that is shared, which at the same time corresponds to a societal and economic value? These are daunting questions that we'll try to address to our speakers today. I can tell you in anticipation, we have an extraordinary panel. We have a panel that is representing large organizations, but also small, medium enterprises, so that we'll try to close the gap, even in the perception of what we consider to be the life in the world of large companies and the life in the world of small companies. Now, before going into the core of our session, I have the duty to remind you that this session is interactive, and we have Wisdomly that is supporting that effort. So if you can see the slides on the way of interacting with us, I'll just make sure that I'll read this out for you. And I don't know whether the slides are there. No, I just see myself. So yes, the slides are coming. So there are 4 ways of interacting with us. Clearly by SMS. So you can send an SMS, and there will be a way for your SMS to reach me while we're on stage, so that we know that there is a question, and eventually we can ask the question. The second way is to have a tweet with a hashtag that is dedicated to the forum. And in this case, same process, we will moderate it and make sure that the question gets to the speakers. You can send, naturally has every tweet, short messages with capacity of a maximum 140 characters, and this is something I ask you to bear in mind. So brevity is queen, we could say. And we can also do a test to see whether you guys are able to interact with me. And so I don't know whether there's a question. Yeah, here's the question. Interesting part of this is that I don't have the answer, but it doesn't matter, right? The interesting part will be, can you please try to provide us with an answer so that we know that it's working, and therefore we're going to be able to be connected. So without any further ado, I think it's important for me to introduce the panel that we're having today in our session. It's a perfectly balanced panel because we have 2 gentlemen and 2 ladies. So we are representing a gender equity effort in the morning panel this morning. So let me try to introduce one speaker at a time because they deserve your attention and they deserve our welcome. The first person I'd like to introduce, in the order that is also presented in the program, is Mr. Vivek Badrinath, which is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Orange. Welcome. Thank you very much. The next person I'd like to introduce is the CEO, the Chief Executive of Europe, Middle East, Retail, and Business Banking, Barclays, Mr. Curt Hess. Curt, welcome to the panel. I'd like to introduce the CEO of Spotone Global Solution and 2013 Women's Forum Rising Talent, Mrs. Mariéme Jamme. Welcome to the panel. And I'd like to introduce the Senior Vice President and Global Chief Marketing Officer for Global Beverage at PepsiCo, Mrs. Kristen Patrick. Welcome, Kristen. Thank you. So the first question I like to ask, definitely Vivek, because I think he can help us in setting the stage of this integration and engagement community, is whether you can talk about the effort that Orange has been making in the past years in engaging these communities in what can be called the ecosystem. What is Orange currently doing? And can we create an integrated model? Can we think about that, or is this something still very abstract?
No, I don't think any of this is really abstract. For us, we're a very large, globally present telecom company, which means that for a long time, what we were doing was pretty much self-standing. We used to convey phone calls, messages from people to people, and that was pretty much the beginning and the end of it. As society digitizes, as the internet has developed, the whole space of what we do and what we serve has completely changed. Now, people use our products and services within things that matter to their digital life. So we cannot live in isolation from what people do with the products, with the networks, with their mobile phones, with the internet connections that they have. So for us, opening up to an ecosystem of people who create value using our products and services, blending them with other things that they innovate on, is an imperative. So I think we recognize that this is probably the single most transformation point of the move towards the internet age for a telco. It's that we cannot look at the world in isolation anymore, which means that we now need to become competitively the telecom operator that's as much as possible the easiest, the most friendly to work with in order to do new things. And so we've taken a really determined view that we need a program around this because we need to change. We need to be able to bring on board people who create products and services using telecoms. We need to be respectful of their values, of their value creation, of how they make money. And so we need to set up programs that change us and make us operator friendly, make us ecosystem friendly.
Mm-hmm. So, Vivek, just to build on that, what are the challenges in doing this? Because I think organizations are recognizing the need for that inclusion to occur. But then from the conceptualization to the practical implementation, sometimes there are many hurdles. Is there anything you can share with us, and what can be the takeaway from your experience?
Yeah, traditionally, when large companies interact with other entities, it's usually either purchasing or deal making, right? And that is exactly what we don't need in this case. So what we've set up is a number of programs whereby we listen and we are able to adapt more to our ecosystem. I'll give you a few examples. One of them, which is one we're very proud of, is one that my colleague Elie Girard and his team set up in the Silicon Valley, called the Orange Fab. The Orange Fab is a place where we go forward, closer to startups, identify them, and make sure we give them time and resources for them to be able to interact with our experts, which does a whale of good to our experts, because they get to see new products, new ideas, and how those new ideas are put in place. And at the same time, we are able to engage at the right scale on a business deal. So we bring them in, we show them around, we help them to interact with our experts. We sometimes help them by a bit of funding, if that helps to make things faster. More often than not, that's not what they're interested in. They're interested in the interaction that helps to jointly develop things. Mm-hmm. We've got a number of startup programs where we bring startups into our labs on a weekly basis to make sure that they interact with the teams in an open dialogue. And it's not contracting, it's really about exchanging and trying to jointly develop things. And finally, we set up a number of platforms which are places where we can expose their products and services. And one of them is on the lower end market of the enterprise, SMEs, which traditionally find it very difficult to access a broad range of customers. And that's one of the things we have to offer. Mm-hmm. We offer reach. We offer reach because we reach out to 300 million customers around the world. And so what we do is we expose our products, our APIs, as we call it, and also we expose products like Cegid, one of our partners in France. We don't do accounting software, but we find that the ability for Cegid to reach several million companies with their accounting software is valuable to them, and it enriches the value of the access to our services for ourselves.
Thank you very much, Vivek. Curt, I'd like to ask you a question. I'd like for you to eventually take us into what is happening currently in the banking industry, and how has Barclays driven this transformation of the open innovation, if there anything you can share with us. It's an industry where we talk about this on a daily basis, and you have experiences as it was mutating and transforming. Yep. So what's your sense of this? Where are we going with the current situation in the industry, and how is innovation transforming the industry today?
Well, I would say that in terms of the banking industry, in one way, we were almost our own threat, because we were not listening to the customer. We were somewhat inward-looking. We were just pushing products without listening and asking the customers exactly what they want. And one of the things that we're currently doing right now is, as an example, in the UK, we have an online campaign called Your Bank, which is going out to consumers and saying to the consumers, what else do you want? What else can we do for you? And is there anything else that we can add that will make things actually better? And that is a step change in terms of where perhaps the industry was a few years back, getting that cooperation from our customers to see what we can do that's different. And another example as well, next week we are actually going to be having the first open innovation event in Barclays. We're going to have 250 entrepreneurs and small businesses they'll be actively collaborating with to, once again, see what we can share about making our customers' experiences better. So in my opinion, there's been a step change in terms of what the bank used to do. And I think the realization right now is that we need to put the customer ahead of where, and I think in the past, that really wasn't the case. The days of the banks owning the space is not there anymore. There could be new entrants that are coming in. The old excuses of, well, there's regulation, there's capital, risk, et cetera. We have to wake up to that. And at last, I feel that the banks are starting to understand that at the end of the day, everyone has a choice. Our customers have a choice. And what are we going to do about that? And how are we going to react to that? And as I mentioned, these are some of the ways that we're addressing that by, once again, going out to our customers, going out to others, having partnerships as another example, to get that information to make our customers' lives that much better.
Mm-hmm. I was coming across the effort of the digital branches that Barclays has pioneered, but I don't know whether everybody knows about what is a digital branch. So if there a way you can help us understand what is a digital branch, what's the value for this, and how is a digital branch connected to the conversation on innovation we're having in this panel?
Yeah, so in terms of the digital branch, it's really giving our customers the ability where they can go into a branch, do more self-serve, easier interaction than what is currently happening, what has happened in the past or even today. So instead of queuing in a line in a branch, the ability to either go and do a video web chat, to self-serve, to expedite what you need to do to get outside of the branch. We are also, in fact, we have a concept, a remote branch here in France called My Barclays that we're looking to expand throughout Europe. And what that does is it does everything that a branch does except the ability to give out cash. You do not have to go to a physical branch in order to do that. So what you can do is you can, either through phone or through email, using online, mobile as well, do all of your banking services. It provides more functionality, easier for our customers as well, with, once again, without having actually to go somewhere and go into a branch. But I think do I feel that the age of branches are over? That we're not going to need branches anymore in the future? I would say that's probably not going to be the case, but more on a limited scale. More on a limited scale in terms of the branch. At times, yes, people need to go into a branch for investment advice, to sit down and talk to somebody. But what we're doing is we are enabling our customers for other ways for them that they can talk to our colleagues at the bank. As I said, it's either going online and popping up a little video that you can talk to somebody without having to go into the branch. It's actually having our branch staff actually going out as well and visiting on customers. One example is currently in the UK and in Europe, we have given out 10,000 iPads to our friend and colleagues. 10,000 iPads to make that interaction easier with our clients. One example we call Bank at Work. The ability to go and visit a company, visit colleagues at their work without them having to then come back to us. So that's some of the digital things that we're currently doing at Barclays. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to have a seamless experience across all of our various channels. Seamless experience. So it's not just going to the branch, online, mobile, phone, email, the ability to do it all that'll make our customers experience that much better.
Great. I actually like to build on a conversation I picked as we were getting ready for the session on the current relationship and partnership between, for example, Orange and Barclays. I think it was symptomatic of this new world reconfiguration that is much more collaborative in nature. And maybe if Vivek and Curt, if you can share something about this. And on the side note, from a technical side, I cannot see any question coming from Wise and Lee. So if anybody can help me with the iPad, it would be appreciated. Sorry, I had to use the power of the microphone to send the message along. So Vivek and Curt, anything to share on that?
Certainly, I think one of the examples of areas where large telecom companies have had to open up is certainly mobile banking. And there are two angles to this. Obviously, in advanced economies, working together with banks in an established banking system to simply bring down the unit cost of transaction because it can be done in mobility on cheaper terminals with less infrastructure is something useful. And we're doing this together with Barclays in the UK. And I think
I think it's been extremely successful, the ability to use the mobile phone, to tap, to do purchases. And that's where, as you're saying, where the sharing of the partnership, the expertise, where merging those two to create something better for our customers as well as customers Orange.
But at the same time, there's also the emerging economies where this phenomenon is extremely strong. The ability to open up the banked population through mobile phone is visible in many economies in Africa. We've rolled out an Orange Money program, which is rising month after month in partnership with several banks, because obviously there is a lot of banking regulation that we are absolutely not ready to take on board. I mean, it's another business. But at the same time, it is opening up our system to people who otherwise would not have access to financial transactions at a distance. They wouldn't be able to send money from one place to another at this level of cost. And it's actually creating new jobs at what one tends to call the bottom of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. We now have manual ATMs, if that makes any sense. People who are receiving and converting electronic payments into cash in locations where no bank, no telecom operator would be able to open a branch office of a permanent nature. And I think that is an asymmetrical benefit. Mm-hmm. They're able to do business. Banks are able to reach into places where they were not able to go, and we're able to make our customers more loyal and make our brand more valuable to them.
So I think, Vivek, by the way, if somebody from the backstage can help me, the iPad is not working, so I cannot see anything. So probably it looked like I was just moderating. I was not moderating. Can I please have somebody fixing the iPad, because I can't see anything on this. Sorry, I couldn't hear it. On the screen? Okay, yeah. I wish I had eagle eyes, but that's all right. We'll get there. This is not. Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, guys. Sorry about this. I think there is an opportunity that is coming from the conversation that Vivek and Curt has started on this collaborative mindset. And when Vivek has introduced the bottom of the pyramid, or you made a specific example of Africa, I think it reminds me of a conversation that we were having in the backstage about what is actually open innovation in Africa. How does it actually differ from what actually we think about it in the established economy. So Mariéme, if there anything you can share with us about this, what is your perspective as you are an entrepreneur that operates both in Europe and in Africa? So is innovation changing the way African businesses operate in? And what's your experience?
I think it's a very good panel. Thank you for having me here. I just need to get something out of the way for Barclays. I think so many people are very, very upset with Barclays because we have a big Somalian community in the UK trying to send the remittances in their own countries, but they can't because of what happened with Barclays. So I just received an email today just asking me if we can help them. That they need to send money home and we need Barclays to help them. I just need to say that. Sorry.
And thank you for raising that. And that's it's a difficult balance that unfortunately Barclays is playing between the needs in Somalia as well as some of the regulation that's out there. And that is something that my organization is not taking lightly in terms of the seriousness of it. So, point well taken.
I will tell them. When you talk about innovation, people don't, I'm sure, when you talk about innovation, people don't think about Africa that much about innovation. They said, oh, okay, innovation is happening in Africa. Actually, we have so many innovation happening in the continent right now, and all the big organizations, big corporate organizations are actually using that now. We have around 92 tech hubs across Africa, and we have 48 women networks where you have the young women from Kibera innovating, they're developing mobile applications. So ICT is revolutionary in Africa right now, and I think we need to really take advantage of the fact that Africa is definitely innovating right now. And the government of Africa are using open innovation, new innovations to combat corruption, good governance, transparency. They're implementing that. The Rwandan government is far, far advanced on that right now. And you have the Senegalese government. They're all using innovation to talk to their people. So what happened right now is that we can't, the African people are now everywhere. They can develop from PHP to Java. You can go to Kampala today and find, an innovation being developed by Barbara Burungi. She has developed a mobile app called Mama App to combat family planning, and we are trying to sell that to the Gate Foundation. 10 years ago, when I used to talk about innovation and technology in Africa, nobody would have listened to me, really. They would say, are you serious? And now, we have almost like 5-10 emails per day asking us to talk about innovation and ICT in Africa. So I think that, it's time for us to share, collaborate, as the team, just saying here, to have open mind and to see, what is happening right now into those tech hubs across Africa, where you have young guys. I was in DRC a couple of months ago. I was sitting with the government, and they talked about census. So in the DRC, they don't have, there's a massive data issue in Africa where you have a, verified data issue where, you don't find data. So all the corporate, the big organization, they have issues really, getting the real data for them. And this gentleman, in the DRC, so when you talk about DRC, everybody talks about corruption, war, rape, the usual stuff we see on TV. But this young guy is actually, he has innovated a census app where, he can, he's taking advantage of the mobile revolution to start using this app to, start counting the number of people we have in the DRC, and they sell it to the government. For me, that's remarkable. And for a young guy who doesn't have access to the internet, doesn't have, have got an old laptop, and he can develop this innovation for his own country, for me, it's like, it's revolutionary. So those are the kind of things I would like to share with you and tell you, we have innovation. We have women in Africa today innovating, developing mobile application, reading the Java books, they're coding, so we need to start thinking how we can use the African techies, I'm a tech activist. I would like to use technology and innovation to develop Africa. And I think that it's the most transparent way in, in getting people engaged on innovation. And I think that will change in the next 5-10 years, because 10 years ago, it wasn't, we wouldn't be able to talk about it. But now, the government of Africa are using, like I said earlier, they're using innovation to talk to their people. You can now have, like we have the Ushahidi platform, where people are using that for crowdsourcing elections in Africa. So you have real data coming from this open spaces, innovation centers across Africa, in Nairobi, from Nairobi to Madagascar. And, so we just need to open mind, and I'm happy to share with you, all the data you need to get access to those people.
So Mariéme, actually, I'm going to take advantage of what you just said. And I'm trying also to put together, now that it's working, so I'm a very happy person, put together some of your questions to make sure that we're generating the juice of the conversation this morning. If you had to suggest, for example, to Vivek and Curt, ways in which they can help the entrepreneurship in Africa, from your perspective, from the perspective of somebody who is actively working on the ground, so that you're closing the gap, which could be the perception from this side of the world to the reality, what would be your comment? What would you say?
I will say mentorship. Mentorship is the big thing that people ask us, and also investment. We have, I was doing some work for President Obama for 3 years, and it's called Apps for Africa. And I've been to around 40 countries across Africa, and really hunting for the young innovators and talented women across Africa. And what I found when I came back was the fact that, these guys really can innovate, they know what they're doing. But the only gap I found was that they are no business people. They know how to innovate, they have ideas, they know how to put it down and design and create, they know all that. But what they didn't have is the business acumen behind the scenes. And some of them were not confident, and they didn't have the right ecosystem in their own countries, for example, to either the financial ecosystem or the technology ecosystem to actually sell their products. So then we put, what we did then to combat that is to put some accelerators across Africa, some women accelerators and open accelerators and startup and mentoring programs where we have the big corporate organization, and then the African themselves, the people in the diaspora, we're asking them to mentor and transfer their skills across Africa to help those young women and guys to sit down with them, really teach them how to sell their products. And then the other thing we found also is that the corporates like that because we didn't have any risk, because the guys already have got the product they wanted to sell. But sitting down with them like 1 hour a week, for example, mentoring them on how to scale their businesses and make it profitable, the organization did like that. And they created a seed capital funding, a small fund. What you see, the guys get a lot of grants. They got a lot of small grants, like $5,000 upward, but it's not enough for these guys. And then we start telling the guys, you can't give $5,000, and the guys can't just live on grants. You need to start really thinking and taking risk in giving them $10,000, $20,000, $25,000, maybe in exchange to get 2% or 5% of their businesses to help these people. And when we did that, we actually found the guy saying, okay, well, I would like to invest in Binta Kudi in Senegal, for example, who is now the governor of Senegal, is using her innovation to, to combat, for example, food issues in Senegal. So or really transport issues, for example, in Senegal. So I go and force the government and really try to beg them, literally, to use and to talk to these guys, because they're the future of Africa, and but they don't have the confidence, and people don't trust them enough. So when you talk about investing in Africa or innovation, they said, well, I don't want to invest because the country is not very stable. So people already have made up their mind before they even get into Africa. So my job is to promote and show them the evidence that they can actually invest in these people, and it can be profitable for them too.
So Mariéme, what I was hearing, so that I'm also allowing Kristen to share her experience with us, is that there is, on one side, the perception of innovation and how we're reaching out to communities. On the other side is more of a cultural dimension of innovation. I think, Christina, your work at PepsiCo goes in that direction of innovation as part of an embedded elements to culture, more than more classic way of thinking about this. Anything you want to share with us so that we're generating a nice fil rouge together with the speakers?
First of all, good morning. I'm so honored to be here amongst all of these esteemed women. So very, very proud to be with all of you today. Just want to respond to something that you said. It's interesting, at PepsiCo, we're actually starting to shoot a lot of our commercials in Africa. And not because the country's so beautiful visually, but because there are a slew of content creators who are becoming really good at shooting and copywriting, and so we've actually been doing that a lot more, which I think is great. What I've been hearing from all of you is sort of an interesting phenomenon I think that all companies need to start thinking about, and it's this idea of an outside, inside, inside, outside company. No longer can you be a siloed organization where everything is inward facing. It's about responding to consumers in real time, because that's the way that we all operate today. With the onslaught of the internet and the digital space, immediately consumers can talk to you about anything they're feeling or thinking. So for PepsiCo, we own many loved consumer brands. We are forced to be very consumer-centric, and we have been over the years, but even now more so. So this idea of innovation as something that sort of, it is a group within a company, it really needs to be sort of embedded within the culture. And we're doing several things at Pepsi. We've been doing a lot of crowdsourcing marketing programs. So for brands like Lay's, asking consumers what flavors they want to see in our products. Or for some of our consumer soda brands, we've been talking to consumers about what they want to see in terms of our marketing. So again, that kind of vision of outside in, inside out, and being as transparent as possible. The other thing we've been doing that's very similar to what I'm hearing from the panel is this idea of going to hotbed areas within the world. So for instance, we are constantly talking to Silicon Valley and looking outside of the organization to gain inspiration and creative ideas, and taking that knowledge and bringing it inside the company. So it could be anything from new businesses that we're launching, or marketing programs and ideas. This idea of constantly innovating is absolutely essential for our business today, especially for brands like PepsiCo. We are all about staying on the cutting edge of culture, so we constantly have to be looking outward in order to influence things inside the organization.
There was something that I was thinking as you were talking, is that for sure PepsiCo is recognized as being a cultural pioneer. It's been able to create a culture way of living, more than if we're looking at the traditional product. Now, how do you deal with the complexity when you're going in different territories? And how do you create the same relevancy when you have very different belief system in place? What has been your experience? Because I think one of the reasons why I'm asking this question is I believe that there's a lot that can be done to create the bridge, but sometimes we kind of lacking the contextual intelligence to do that, because we are too absorbed by what you said, the inward side. So if you can share anything about.
That's an interesting question. As I look across the world, even though there are hits of popular culture in every region, so for instance, like I'm looking at my soda can, I've got Beyonce on it. for us to make a decision about partnering with Beyonce on a global level, we have to make sure that she's sort of culturally relevant around the world. And sometimes she might be hot in North America, but there's absolutely no relevance for her in Asia, as an example. So staying on top of culture is absolutely essential, and the idea of brands that create culture versus following them is actually a really difficult skill set. Some of it is gut instinct, some of it is tracking trends, listening to consumers, some of it is inventing culture yourself. So because of the prowess that we have in terms of our consumer connection, we're actually able to find musicians at a very up-and-coming level and create this magic around them, if you will. I think the other thing is that there are inherent human truths that connect all of us together. Happiness is one of them. The idea of excitement. And the Pepsi brand stands for this idea of kind of living in the now and creating excitement. And I think that that's something that everybody can say that they find inspirational. So it's sort of finding those human truths and connecting to them. It's watching the cultural zeitgeist and trying to find those connections. But we don't do that by sitting in New York City. We do that by going out and connecting with consumers digitally, by connecting with influencers in Silicon Valley and Hollywood and Bollywood, and finding the content creators in Africa. So we truly have to think globally in order to excel at what we do.
Thank you very much. Mariéme, actually like to ask you a question, also building on our audience that is populating our session. And so there is a question that got my attention, which is, you know, investing in Africa, great. It's a great idea, and we understand the necessity for this to occur. But we are finding a lot of complication in doing this, mainly because we are unprepared to deal with the contest, which is not responding to what we have a priori set up as our expectations. What's your best suggestion? How can we deal with that strong human complexity that is in Africa without getting lost, without feeling that it's only about the amount of the investment? So what can we learn from the experience? Because I think if we're understanding how that can be possible, even from the perspective of large organization operating globally, there's a lot of learning to be integrated and imported.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I always get asked this question, is it too risky to invest in Africa? But I think sometimes there's a fear attached to it as well. And one thing I say to my clients and my customers, what if you were not afraid? You know, I know investors don't think about, you know, scary, but they think about the risk. But if you were not afraid in going to Africa and in investing in people and seeing the result, what would happen? Have you thought about that? And I think I liked the talk yesterday of Mr. Picard. We need to change altitudes around the way we perceive Africa. I've seen people making billions right now, dollars in Africa, seriously. 10 years ago, they were not making money. Right now, they're making a lot of money in the continent because they took the risk to actually invest. I'm not asking you to go and, you know, because it could be a jungle sometime, trust me. You can't go just inside and invest in anyone, but I think you need to find the right partners on the ground, especially the tech hubs. They are scrutinized. The people inside the tech hubs are, you know, really serious people. They are smart people you can invest in. You also have organizations like Safaricom in Kenya. Barclays work with them closely. And Pepsi is doing a good job in some of the, you know, a part of the CSR, you know, really working with women organizations and all the SMEs across Africa. And I think if you've been in Africa and established yourself there for quite a long time, you know, you can figure out now, actually, you know what, it's not very risky to invest. But, you know, if you don't invest, the consequences are larger than, you know, anything else. I think just having the right connections, we have, you know, created a fund among us, the diaspora, you know, to you know, put $1,000, like, you know, every month to entrepreneurs. You know, we're investing back. You know, we had something called Made in Africa with prominent Africans in the United Kingdom. You know, Oswald Botang is one of them. Those people, they will not invest in Africa if they didn't see the potential. So we putting money on, you know, as you know, we've all studied in the West. We all had our MBAs, our PhDs. So we're capable of, you know, investing in our continent, but we don't have the right system in place. That's the biggest issue for us too. So that's why we talk to the policymakers, we force the government. You got Barbara James in Nigeria fighting with the Nigerian government right now to put a real financial ecosystem in place to invest. But that's the larger scale. But the small scale is like finding the SMEs, like Microsoft Africa just created an initiative. I'm sitting on the board right now where we're going to be investing in youth and the SMEs. Think about it in about the next 5 years. How much money that will generate for Africa, for the youth, and also for Microsoft, of course, because they're going to use their platform to, help Africans, really get from, A to Z when it comes to their businesses. It's more the business, the know-how than investing, because if you get the right people, you can actually make, real profit and see your return.
Can I just make a quick comment on that? I worked in Africa for a couple of years and overseeing 10 countries. And what I'm getting at in terms of your comments around the investment is that we were trying to do something in Ghana, and unfortunately, in terms of making that investment, our colleagues in the UK were uncomfortable with the risk. They were uncomfortable with the risk, and for some of that was because they never were in Africa. They never visited the countries. They never met the people in the countries. They never got to know the industries. And that is another big step that has to change, is that people need to get outside and visit these countries to make a better decision than perhaps what was happening in the past. So that was one of the other things that we did in Barclays, getting the people out of the headquarters and visiting our countries to see actually what's happening on the ground. And that's when we actually started to make some additional investments in Africa.
Yeah, I do believe that most of the actions that we can drive in Africa are not macroeconomic in nature as corporations. There are two initiatives that we are very proud of. One of them is the social entrepreneur program that we, over the years, have been supporting, and in order to highlight specific social entrepreneurship, that, sure, gives us the opportunity to promote great initiatives. It also gives us deeper insights into what matters and what can develop the society. So under my friend Christine Albanel's leadership, this is a program that we continue to develop year after year. And there are lots of very different initiatives that we can take that are very original in nature. One of them that we did was around data. One of the biggest value creators is actually the access to data. So what we did is we ran a program called Data for Development. That program was one where we just took mobile phone call data, anonymized. We took off the names and the phone numbers, but it helps us to know where from and where to people call, and where from and where to people go. And we just put that data out. I mean, made it available to researchers and said, well, if you can do anything with this that's useful to your line of thought, please be our guests. We had 200 respondents from academics, I mean, pretty much the most prestigious universities and research teams in the world, which found value in this data to either infer patterns for development, for infrastructure, for seeing how diseases propagate. And I think the ability for technology beyond making communication possible or access possible to actually provide insights into things that cannot be measured on the ground economically is also something that we should pay attention to.
I think there is a lot of learning. What I was thinking, I was contemplating the panel that I'm fortunate to moderate, is how much really can be done in the power of the conversation. If you're looking at how telecommunication has empowered the ability for commerce and business to occur, how banking has provided access where access was not there before, how culture has pushed the agenda of the legitimacy to believe in one personal ability to develop as a person, so that we can dare, and entrepreneurship at the bottom of the pyramid. I think there is a lot of potential in what you see today in the stage and the ability to create the type of conversation. I think if I can build on your contribution, I think, Kristen, there was a good question, was straightforward for you coming from the audience, which was more about where do you think Pepsi is going in terms of innovation at the bottom of the pyramid? If applicable with the strategy of the organization, what do you think? What's your take on that?
Let's define bottom of the pyramid. We're talking about like a mass consumer.
Yes, yeah? And the emerging. Let's say we can call it the poorest economy.
Okay. So our brands are sold all over the world. So the reason I asked, like, what do we mean by bottom of the pyramid is because we don't really distinguish by, we don't distinguish things in that manner. So, you know, we have brands that are sold all over the world, and in some places they're very strong consumer brands and more relevant, and in other places they're not known. Like we have a brand called Mirinda that it's an orange cola soda brand, and in some places of the world it's very, very strong. So we look at our business in terms of each of the regions specifically. I was watching the slate of questions coming up, and one of them was around this idea of like what is Pepsi doing to not just based on the now but the future. So for some of the bottom of the pyramid countries, we have the way that we do our business is called performance with purpose. So we're constantly striving to, you know, create amazing consumer brands and snacks and sodas that appeal to consumers. And in each part of the world, we do things from a CSR perspective that is really sort of inherent in that region. So in India, as an example, we created a water program. And so everything is sort of regionally based in terms of where we go, but the overlying ethos at the company is this idea of performance with purpose.
Great. One part of our panel today also has to discuss the concept of where is competitive advantage today. And we've been using the terminology competitive advantage probably without adjusting it to the fact that the times have changed. And that's the question I'm going to ask my speakers, because at the end of the day, we still need to make sure that we encounter, we find, and we drive a degree of competitive advantage, but it has changed. It has changed in the semantics, it has changed in the application, it has changed in what it means in the life of the organization to thrive for competitive advantage. So in the light of the 21st century, considering how inclusive your business is becoming, you're definitely opening, you're talking about your product, but you're also at the same time opening always to this ecosystem that is around you. And I think we're very pleased to see that this is happening. It's not wholly in the conversation. So where is today competitive advantage in your organization? Has it changed? Can you share with us what has been your major learning behind this? And I think it would be a great question for all of you eventually to address. Please, Vivek.
If I take just a very concrete example of today, okay, we're rolling out 4G networks across many, many countries. And to a large extent, that's a business competition that's very visible. The large operators are all competing, saying my network is this and my network is that. One of the things we've really tried to make a difference on was try to understand how these networks can improve the business value for many of our partners. So jointly with my colleague Delphine Arnott, who runs our largest business, Orange France, and has a very large 4G rollout in front of her, we went and launched an innovation program to help entrepreneurs to use 4G to do great apps. Isn't that a competitive advantage? Mm-hmm. If people create applications based on 4G, and we've given, funding and mainly access to technical resources so that they're early to market, so that startups that can develop 4G products and services are actually able to play with it, test it, improve it, and perfect it early to market. That gives more value, generates more value for our 4G solutions than our competitors. And so the outside-in view actually enhances the value of our product, whereas it's not actually directly part of what we build with our own hands. And I think that's something, the ecosystem friendliness of a player can actually make a visible difference when on all the other metrics, we are subjected to consultant benchmarks that tell us what the other guys are going to be investing, what technology they're going to be using, how to tune it best. We're not going to get as much differentiation in some of these areas, but we're going to get it through what people are able to do with it, and our ability to attract those people to work with us. And that's a differentiation, because being better at working with third parties, being better at working with startups, at being respectful of their business model and making sure that we don't stifle them by our big company ways, is going to make a big difference.
I think this is a brilliant contribution. It's so counterintuitive that if we were in the mindset of 1980, 1990, when we were thinking about competitive advantage, still as this seclusive process of being separated from the rest of the world. And I think what Vivek just shared with us is actually the sign of the transformation occurring. So thank you, Vivek, for that. Curt, your experience, how do you talk about competitive advantage in your own industry today? How has it changed? Anything you want to share with us?
Well, as I said before, I think the days of the banks owning that experience with the customers are over. So there are so many other players that are out there right now, such as you think about PayPal or Amazon. You have all the other retailers that are coming out, say here in the UK, say Tesco and et cetera. So it's not just, well, we're a bank and therefore we can handle all your financial services. That's just not gonna fly anymore. If I think about those other non-bank players that are there, a lot of them are somewhat product specific, such as on the payment side, or they're going out to just their own customer base in a way without somewhat branching out. And one of the things that somewhat inhibits others in terms of getting into the financial service space is around the regulation, is around the scale as well. But once again, banks cannot rest on those laurels as they have in the past, expecting that that's going to be the case, going forward. And that's where, as I earlier mentioned, around the need to go out and get other opinions from other industries. I mentioned our Open Innovation event. Going out to our customers, going out to our colleagues, and getting that information back in, that we can actually then start to make a difference and do something differently that wasn't done in the past. And one example of that was in terms of listening to our customers, we determined that there was a number of things out there that they wanted. And it also helped, I think, society more at large in terms of helping some of our hearing impaired customers in terms of talking ATMs, also with some of our sight impaired customers, listening to them. Well, what can we do differently to help you? And then we have a sign video program where they can go online and actually do sign language with somebody in terms of helping with their banking needs. So these are some of the things that I think we are changing at last without just going out with one size fits all to everyone. It's not one size fits all. It's got to be listening to what our customers want, need, and expect, and doing segmentation, making things different than what has happened in the past. And I think that as long as we can listen to our clients and customers, react to them, we will be able to still be competitive, understanding that it's continually changing.
Thank you, Curt. Mariéme, you actually run in Spotone Global Solutions, so we can talk about maybe that experience for you. And as a small medium enterprise, so we were having a conversation prior to the meeting. I think 15 employees. Yeah. So a different perspective from operating large organizations. So where is competitive advantage for you? How do you define it, and what does it mean for a small entity?
We are cutting costs. We're cutting costs quite a lot. We've been spending a lot of money probably, but in the last 2 years, I've completely changed the strategy of the company, and we are using now, emerging countries technologies. That's what we're using for the company. And we also advise our, because we help US companies, technology companies, set a foothold in Middle East, Africa, and Asia. And so when they, from the editing point, when they're developing their software to the, putting into the market, we really, asking them to use the African techies themselves to do that. And there's a lot of open source involved to sell to the African government, because they are more comfortable in doing that now, in using open source, because they, in the last 20, 30 years, the African government has spent so much money in software, especially the Microsoft one, Windows. So they spend so much money on that, and now we're trying to make sure that they switch the, all the cost to open African innovation, open African innovation. And my company, that's what we do. We only use the young, talented Africans, their solutions, and then as soon as it works for us, we then promote it to, globally, so they can get, they can get visibility as well. So that's what we do. We're just cutting costs.
Very good.
Yeah.
Kristen? And PepsiCo?
Competitive advantage. It's interesting because the conversation actually comes full circle. If you are innovative and creative, that immediately sets you apart from your competitors. And so this idea of outside in, inside out organization is absolutely essential to, I think, every company moving forward. I also think that as I'm watching what's happening with like the next generation of consumers, who we call Generation Y, they're creating their own brands based on needs. So if you look around at some of they're taking out the big players. They're taking out car rental companies like Hertz and Avis and creating digital car rental companies, or you can go and rent a car for the day. And it's something that it is something that sprung up digitally from this new generation. I think that if we're not listening to sort of what we call the bottom of the pyramid, I don't like that term, because some of the best ideas are coming from Africa, and they're coming from consumers, and they're creating new companies and new ventures. And keeping your eyes and ears open as to some of those ideas, that's really the competitive advantage. Some of the soda partners that we're looking at are these tiny little players who are taking the art and the craft of making sodas into account. And that's a very important trend, because this idea of quality and transparency and authenticity is really, really important. So some of the best inspiration comes from listening to the smaller players and what's happening in your country. And that's really what staying on top of the competition is about, I think, nowadays.
Very good.
I just want to add something.
Please.
I think if we start, if we start really using the African techies, the African entrepreneurs, this organization, they will save themselves so much money, because it's not cost effective. It's not expensive to have those guys from India to Africa, and they are so fresh content. They kind of like really cool guys, and they know exactly what they're doing. You can save so much money, by using the African entrepreneurs to make your business successful around the world.
And Vivek.
Yes, now I'd like to concur to what Kristen as well just said. I think that the digitization of interaction between consumers and brands is completely changing a lot of things in the way we are able to interact with customers. Okay, so that's easy to figure out. What it does, it changes the pressure on us to open up. We launched a digital brand called Sosh. And there was a forum, because we figured out that people like to help each other. And yes, it's scary, because at some points when it doesn't work, they do complain about the product, make negative comments, make positive comments, and it's out there. And it's open, and it's in the open. But the next level of that conversation is that they give you ideas on making things better. So actually for customers to be faced with the customer experience, and then leveraging that to give ideas, the conversation, what we receive out of this through the social ideas, which is really social innovation coming straight from the customer, is actually much richer than any of the perceptions that come out on those forums and on those websites. So I think this, when you're talking about outside in, that's one thing. But to get outside in, you need to go and open up your information, open up your platforms, and not be scared of what will, in some cases, appear, because that's how you improve.
I think what we're learning in this plenary is really that moving away from fear is where the future is. I think we've been driven by fear of competitors, a fear of what the other were doing, fear that we might lose our advantage. But in reality, a fear is more of an intrinsic problem rather than a real problem out there. We have some time for questions that are coming from the audience, with the technology through the microphone. So I actually like to come and look for you so that we can have questions coming directly. It's a nice way to create some interaction with the audience and our extraordinary panel. So why don't we do this? Why don't we are using this time before the end of the presentation to ask questions to our guest, to make sure that we can continue what I called before the juice, and I kind of like that. I like it's the juice. So I see hands up. I have no idea how to give you priority, so everybody's first, okay? So let me come down because I kind of like. I saw this in Jerry Springer, and it kind of looks pretty cool.
Hello, Caroline Hargrove, Technical Director of McLaren Applied Technologies. I've got a question for Kirsten. One of the things I'm hearing here in terms of open innovation is mainly on the marketing side. I'd like to know, with all the obesity in the world, and unfortunately your products being often linked with not helping the cause with fizzy drinks and snacks, how do you envisage open innovation helping in your actual products, not the marketing of them, but the quality and the sort of, you know, the end goal of not getting people more diseases? And
Sure. So as our company is constantly innovating from an R&D perspective, trying to bring, you know, the best nutrients forward to consumers. And as technology and science and health and wellness are all coming up as very important to consumers, our company's constantly innovating and trying to bring the best of everything to the world. So again, that idea of like performance with purpose, like we live it. We live it every single day. It is Ingenuity, the CEO of PepsiCo's like main goal. And so you will see constant innovation in terms of the technology in our colas and bringing, you know, more products to the market that have to do with health and wellness. We're also buying up brands that are focused on that piece of the puzzle that's so important to consumers.
So we're going to go to the next question. My role in this phase is mainly timekeeper. So it's, I think there's a question up there. So if the microphone could run up to the person at the top, then we can take the question.
Thank you. I'm Marie Daubin from Girls in Web. I would like to ask you how you integrate your competitors in your open innovation, because you talked about doing better than them, but you didn't talk about interact with them.
Well, you know, in our sector, the relationship with competitors is permanent. Why? Because for two reasons. We work towards standards to a large extent. And so that happens because we work upstream with R&D to make sure that we are on the same standards. And usually adoption of a technology is helpful to us. If you take the good old story of the SMS was not a big thing until all operators were able to interoperate and you were able to send an SMS without having to worry about who was the supplier or the telecom provider of your partner, the person you were trying to write to. So it kind of flows in the DNA that compatibility is useful, and we've always had to interconnect together because, you know, we can compete on being more attractive to customers, but at the end of the day, that message has to go through from one network to the other. So I'd say both working upstream with research labs to ensure that the right technologies are made readily available to technology suppliers and to all telcos, or working in industry fora. If you take the area of near-field communications and the tap payments, we all know that this technology will become big only if most operators are able to embed it in cell phones that are used by their customers, so that vendors feel happy about using it to accept payments, for instance. So there's no doubt, at least in the telecom industry, that there is a level of interoperability, of industry dialogue, of joint ecosystem development that we need to do in many areas, be it communications or new applications like payments.
Thank you, Vivek. Definitely, I'd like to take one more question. I think we have the time. If I can invite you to ask a question that's going to help capture the key lesson of this session and how we're driving organization in the 21st century by bearing in mind that innovation is a must, but what is that must and how do we lead it to a successful venture? So I think we have a question here.
Yes,
to the front.
Nilgün Langenberg from Hydrogen Struggles. How are you involving your investors or supervisory boards in new ways of innovation? So how are you educating them? How are you inspiring them about open innovation, new ways of innovation, social innovation?
I can answer that. For us, we organize conferences across the globe, and we organize conferences in Africa, for example, and we organize small and intimate meetings with big corporate organizations, for example. There's a lot of education need, especially when you talk about investing in Africa. As I said earlier, people are always scared and always worried. They always, always people asking questions, why should I, is it risky? So we organize big conferences where we invite people, we do brainstorming sessions quite a lot. So we really have intimate brainstorming session where we invite the players, so the innovators in the room, the investors, the venture capitalists, the policy makers. We invite them and really discuss. I think that's one of our biggest thing. Brainstorming and sharing ideas, really sitting down and sharing ideas about what can we do to invest in Africa. And we have found that very, very successful. And all our clients are asking us before they even launch a product in Africa or before they even get into the continent, they said, can you organize like 10 or 20 brainstorming sessions in 20 countries? Because we've got a database, then it allows them to know, to spend time in the continent, to also really meet these key players we put in front of them.
Thank you for your question. I'd like to see more questions. I see hands.
Can I just state something that I'm
Please, Kristen. In the meantime, we're locating the next question maker.
As we're all sitting here talking about this open innovation culture and getting ideas from the outside, it's a double-edged sword. And the fact is that it also forces companies to become editors of choices, to curate the best ideas. So a lot of times when we do these brainstorming sessions, you often get people from outside of your industry who have a perspective or a point of view, and there's definite value in that, but oftentimes it forces you to make decisions. And so that's the double-edged sword to all of this idea about open innovation. I remember I was talking to somebody at PepsiCo, and they had held a brainstorming session in Latin America. And it was being run by a creative director who was very new on the brand, sort of had no history, and we spent a lot of money to put on this creative session, this innovation session, and what we got out of it was really not that valuable. So in some instances, it is the most amazing thing, and in other instances, again, this idea of companies and brands becoming editors of choices, it really places you more in that curation role.
So I'm here, by the way, guys, so in case you don't see me, I'm moving around. There is a question over there.
Yes.
One second. I invite you to engage with the panel as much as you can. That's going to be your best way to deserve a coffee, okay? So that's the only way for you to deserve a coffee. So we're going to have a question. Yeah. Please get up so that we can see you.
Yes, hello, Virginie Hess from France 24 International News Channel. Do you think that women have a particular role to play in innovation, and particularly in open innovation? And what role?
I think for us, I can talk for Africa and the women I see into the tech sector, for example. All the innovation the women are developing are very locally based innovations, and they very social. There is something they need in the continent. Like I said earlier, Barbara, she's developing something called Mama App on family planning issues in Africa. And you have, for many years, NGOs going to Africa talking about family planning and helping women to, but she's now developing this mobile app where sexuality is not something we talk about openly in the continent, and especially when you come from where I come from in Senegal, where it's a very Muslim country, and we don't talk about it openly. And you have, women, dying with cervical cancer, breast cancer, all these issues. So she came up with this idea to develop Mama App, where you have all the details on the app, from, how many condoms do you need today, up to, have you taken your pills? And I think that's an amazing revolution for the women in Africa.
Kristen.
I would just say, I'm sorry, I would say that you really have to build diversity into your innovation. And one of the ways that we did that at Barclays, as well as we came out with, listen to our customers, they wanted personalized debit cards. And we went out with an advert with a same-sex couple on our personalized debit card. And that was in late 2012. And just building in diversity, listening to the customers, throughout all strands of diversity, to me makes a great difference. And I already gave a couple examples of how we have taken that we're making things better for our customers.
Kristen.
Some of the best and brightest women that I've worked with throughout my career are the ones that are advancing business. I think that women absolutely play a role in innovation, and I think that what I've found is a sensitivity and an insight with women that force conversations in business that wouldn't typically happen if we weren't in the room. I think it's incredibly important that we band together and help each other. And I think that it's not because we're weak. I think it's because we've been disadvantaged over the years. But again, I think that throughout my career, some of the most insightful, intelligent people have been women. And so we are forcing conversations that would not happen if we were not in the room.
I just wanted to say something about, I thought about something the other day when I was invited for this panel. It's cross-innovation between Africa and Europe. And the reason why I'm saying this, there's a lady in Nairobi today who's developed something called iCow, and I think for the agriculture sector. And I think that, you know, as we talk about open innovation and cultural issues, we need to start thinking about cross-innovation, cross-open innovation, how, you know, we can implement the innovation that's been developed in the continent to Europe, vice versa. And I think, you know, we can use them quite a lot in Europe, then, you know, that's something we really need to think about across, you know, open innovation.
So Vivek, you want to take
it? Yeah, just to chip in and taking the risk of jumping into stereotype, which is always the risk here. Now, first of all, yeah, we really believe that the diversity of the team helps you to, if you're talking to lots of different people, and open innovation is all about that, and they're different and they come from various horizons, having a diverse team of talented people is what makes a difference, and we certainly would like to continue to advance this work on diversity, and that's one. Maybe at the risk of stereotype, there is certainly a lot of listening skills that are more than ever required in open innovation versus projecting your technology and your solutions. And maybe our women leaders show this strength a bit more than others. All right?
So we have a question, I think, right here. Please.
Brigitte Morel-Curvan with Korn Ferry. In our work, executive development of leaders, we find two major barriers to innovation. One is organizational. It's really the short-term focus on results. The other one is more individual, and you can call it fear of failure or risk aversion. I am curious, what do you do in your organizations to deal with those barriers?
Well, I would say in terms of banking, I mean, one of the issues that we had in terms of some of the crisis that happened was more of that short-term focus. It was more that inward looking without more broader looking at what our customers want versus what actually the bank wants. And I would say that I think it's a realization now and a necessity that we take our heads up out of the silos, out of the bunker, look across and see what's actually, what's going on out there with our customers, with our competitors, with wider society at large. So it has to change, and we are critically aware of it. You know, as I did mention, we're having a first open innovation event next week for Barclays. I guess the other question could be, well, why the hell is it taking that long to have it until next week that we're having it? But we are having it, and we are going out there now. We are getting information from our customers that in the past we just did not do. So that's some of the changes that we're doing right now in Barclays.
Kristen, and then we're going to take a question from this side, but because this side of the house is very prolific, I'm going to move over here, making sure you guys are going to ask the last question I'm ready for. Please.
This is a really interesting question for me, because I've been in a lot of organizations where the leader has wanted to innovate, but you have a very stuck culture. So the cultural change and the change management, and when you don't address that and you just kind of go in and say, okay, we're changing everything, it completely disassembles the organization. So for me, I've always been one of the change agents that sort of comes into companies and with new ideas and creativity. And usually what I do is I find the right people. And by that I mean there's people who are going to want to innovate and change and be creative. Then there's what I call the fence sitters, the people who are just like, okay, show me, I'm gonna stay here and not follow you unless I see something good or cool happen. And then there's just those people who wanna stay stuck in the culture. They don't wanna innovate, they're very happy with status quo, and those people may never come along. So it's about being really strategic with regards to the development of a change management strategy and like finding your people, finding your posse within within the organization.
We have one question right there that I promised before, and is the question maker still there? There you are. And then please, last question, guys, coming from this side of the world, okay? You got it. All right.
Andrea Menezes from Standard Bank. It's a little bit of continuation of the last question. We had a session yesterday afternoon regarding education and how much the new generation is really able to be innovative or creative. And my question to you is how difficult your organization, or how easy, or what's your organization feeling about these new people that are joining your company in terms of innovation?
For us, every August we have around 2 or 3 one African and we have 2 British guys. So if I'm in the UK, that's what I do. So if I'm in Africa, for example, I take 2. I bring one young lady from the UK or from a young guy from the UK to come with me to start really seeing all these tech hubs I'm talking about. And that's where, when they come back, they said, wow, not only they get educated about the whole, entire tech ecosystem in Africa, they also, their mind is completely blown. They say, wow, I didn't see this before. So we really encourage them to share ideas. For me, that's very, very important. And it educates them to understand the West and also what's happening in Africa. And also you get better results. And they build a great friendship afterward by being educated. So that's what we do really in every August in my company.
Let me just make one comment. In the UK, we have a concept called Digital Eagles, where we have about 4,000 colleagues on the branch network that are adept at iPads, smartphones, etc. And they will therefore then go out and train customers, they'll train additional staff, and that has been exploding throughout our whole branch network. And this way, we have examples of, 80-year-olds coming into branch, 70-year-olds, well, how do I work this? And it's our colleagues spending the time showing them, well, you can do this, and this is how it works. And that's one way of our culture changing, which we never have done in the past.
So as we're bringing our session to its completion, we have the final question from the audience coming from here, please.
Yes, my name is Uli Matassar. I'm from the World Bank, and my question is for my sister, Mariéme Jamme. I want to know, in open innovation, how do you define success?
Well, that's a very good one. I think the World Bank, especially the World Bank, is doing a great job right now in Africa when it comes to really showing the great successes in innovation in Africa, especially the InfoDev team. Valerie da Costa, she's amazing, one of my heroes. And I think it's by showcasing, the amount of innovation that comes from the continent, I think. Again, as I said earlier, if people are not educated about what's happening in the continent, who's doing what they can do, can they develop mobile apps, can they create local solutions, for example, you can't find success. It's just me talking to myself, basically. So, that's what I do. I showcase these women across Africa. I showcase the guys who are developing. I can name thousands of apps. I've got right now, I've got a bank of apps. I call them sitting down somewhere in my desk where I would like to show this to the world from so many subjects, from climate change issues to agriculture issues. But who am I going to tell that my guys are developing this? Please talk to them. Please invest to these people. Please help them create a success. Please help me create the next, Bill Gates, the next Mark Zuckerberg. Please come and see my guys, Binta, how much she's sitting down without internet connection, without heat in Dakar, developing this mobile application. So unless we all sit down and share ideas and really open our mind and our heart into what's happening in the continent right now, because at the end of the day, we are all well-meaning people. We're doing something in Africa. Every single individual here has done something in Africa once in his life, at least. But, you know, but we need to, like, I will always talk about what Mr. Picard said yesterday. We need to change altitude. We need to believe that Africa is changing. We need to believe that women in Africa are changing. They're no object of development anymore. We need to believe that there are my guys in Nairobi, in Ghana, developing these apps. And unless Barclays doing a great job there, but they will sort out the remittance issues by the time we finish. So, you know, I think we need to really have our heart in the right place and say, let me go and, you know, sit down with these guys in Nairobi, in Senegal, and just listen to them. Just listen 5 seconds what they can do. And then if you're not interested, come back, it's fine. But please see what I'm saying and you'll see a great difference.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure this is the warm-up for the one that is coming now, because as we come into the end of our session, we want to say we salute and we thank our 4 extraordinary speakers. Thank you.